I don't know what further discussions we might have had about Miss Switch if the school bell hadn't rung. We all scrambled down from the monkey bars and headed across the blacktop toward the building. It was then a thought struck me. "Banana," I said, "isn't your mother some kind of a big wheel in the PTA?" "Yeah," said Banana, looking uncomfortable. "President, why?" "I'd think she'd know who our teacher is," I said. "Didn't she tell you?" "No," said Banana. "If she did, wouldn't I have said? I think she knows, but she says unless it's a matter of life or death, I'm going to have to find things out just like everyone else whose mother is not PTA president." We all shrugged. There went the pipeline to interesting advance information. "I did find out something, though," Banana said quickly, as if he needed to make up for his mother's unfortunate attitude. "I heard her talking to someone on the telephone about it. Mrs. Grimble had an accident and busted an arm and a leg. There's going to be a substitute principal until she gets back." Substitute? Wasn't that what Miss Switch had been, a substitute? So what if it was as a substitute teacher? Wasn't it just possible she could just as well come as a substitute principal? I was having difficulty breathing thinking about it. "Did you hear any name, mentioned, Banana?" I asked, digging for clues. "No," said Banana, "but my mother was giggling, and her face was all pink." "She must have changed the subject. I never heard of anyone giggling about a new principal," said Pete Mouse. You couldn't argue with that. Anyway, first things first, and we were now about to find out who was going to be leading us through the perils of 6th grade. Hands in pockets, being cool guy 6th graders, we slouched on down the old familiar Pepperdine hallway and entered the door of room 12. Oh no! Seated at the teacher's desk was not our 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Instead, it was very old Mrs. Potts, who had been our teacher in 2nd grade. I thought she had retired the year before. Was she going to be able to remember that 2nd grade had been replaced with 6th grade? She beamed at us as we all filed into the room. "My," she said, "almost all my old 2nd grade class back with me again. Isn't it wonderful? Why, there's Rupert and Wayne and Tommy and Harvey. Oh, and there's Melvin and Billy and oh, so many of you." We smiled weakly at Mrs. Potts, found desks for ourselves, and fell into them. I didn't mind about everyone else, but I couldn't agree with Mrs. Potts about Melvin Bothwick and Billy Swanson being wonderful in anyone's class. Melvin was a sneak and a tattletale, and Billy was an oversized bully who thought he could get away with just about anything. He had made every teacher's life miserable, including Mrs. Potts, since the 1st grade. If she couldn't remember, how was she going to remember we weren't her little 2nd graders anymore? The bell rang, and the school year officially began. But you wouldn't have known it from the hubbub continuing in the classroom. "Now, children, Mrs. Potts said helplessly. But the boys kept on shoving and punching each other in the ribs as books were passed out. The girls kept on talking to each other, and Billy Swanson was already at work tearing off bits of paper and making the spitballs for which he had been famous all through 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. I could see that things were not looking good for the 6th grade. Would this situation in Miss Switch's former 5th grade be enough to bring her back as our substitute principal? How long was I going to have to wait to find out? As it turned out, no more than an hour later, Mrs. Potts made the following announcement. "The new principal will be visiting each class this morning, starting with our class. Why, it should be about this very minute." Sure enough, at that moment voices were heard approaching room 12. My eyes were nailed to the doorway. Soon, all would be revealed. First through the door came Mrs. Fana, Banana's mother, president of the PTA. Now, I could understand why a mother who is president of the PTA might have to dress up a little to take the principal on a tour of the school,